For a premier to say, well, the U.S. could pull it out at any minute. The response is there's two countries that have been relatively harsh against the United States, and that's China and Canada.
That harsh retaliation.
All we do is respond to it.
Those alleged attacks were a response from insults from Donald Trump, who spent much of the winter calling.
Trade relations between the United States and Canada are once again on edge. Washington now claims Ottawa has pulled the rug out from the USMCA, the North American trade pact that was meant to guarantee stability. At the center of this storm is President Donald Trump, whose tariff-first strategy has shaken both allies and rivals. But here's the contradiction. While U.S. officials blame Canada, the real source of tension is Trump's own tariff policy. The question is simple. Who truly undermined the foundation of North American free trade? Trump's tariff policy, the spark that lit the fire. The current standoff began back in March 2025, when Trump launched a new round of tariffs. Canadian goods, despite being covered under USMCA, were not exempt at first. That decision sent shockwaves through financial markets. Wall Street plunged, and businesses feared supply chains would be upended. Under pressure, the White House later granted Canada a temporary exemption. But the message was clear. This protection could vanish at any time. It was less a gesture of goodwill and more a reminder that Trump could change the rules overnight. By using tariffs as a weapon, Trump injected uncertainty into what should have been a predictable trade system. Agreements like USMCA are designed to give businesses stability, but Trump turned that stability into leverage. Ottawa faced a choice: stay quiet and absorb the damage or push back. Canada chose to push back. Canada strikes back, and Washington shifts the blame. Ottawa retaliated with counter-tariffs on orange juice, motorcycles, and appliances, products carefully chosen to hit key American states. Ontario even pulled U.S. liquor from store shelves, while Canadian leaders urged citizens to think twice before traveling south. These were not just symbolic moves. They were meant to signal that Canada would not allow itself to be bullied. Prime Minister Mark Carney presented Canada as calm but firm, showing that Ottawa had tools of its own. But in Washington, this was framed very differently. U.S. Ambassador Pete Ho declared that Canada, not the United States, had pulled the rug out from USMCA. The logic was flipped. Retaliation was portrayed as the original sin. Yet the timeline is clear. It was Trump's tariffs, not Canada's response, that first shook the foundations of the deal. The ambassador's accusation reflects a common Trump strategy: shift blame to gain the upper hand in negotiations and shape public opinion. The personal and political angle. Beyond tariffs, the conflict has taken on a personal edge. Trump himself inflamed tensions by mocking Canada, even suggesting it should become America's 51st state. For Canadians, such remarks crossed a line, turning a trade dispute into a matter of national pride. Canadian politicians fired back. Some attacked Trump directly, criticizing him personally as much as his policies. Ambassador Ho condemned these comments, insisting that Canada had made the fight personal. But it was Trump who blurred the boundary first, mixing personal insults with policy choices. This dynamic shows the dispute is not only about trade flows or tariffs. It has become a clash of political images. Trump's show of toughness versus Carney's insistence on Canadian independence. Economic risks across North America. Behind the war of words are real risks. If Trump withdraws exemptions, supply chains across North America could be thrown into chaos. The auto industry, where parts cross the border multiple times before a car is finished, would be especially vulnerable. Farmers could lose access to vital export markets. Everyday goods, from household appliances to groceries, could climb in price, adding more pressure on consumers already dealing with inflation. Even more damaging is the uncertainty. Businesses need stability to invest, but if tariffs can appear overnight, even against treaty partners, confidence collapses. Companies delay expansion, workers lose jobs, and economic growth slows. At the global level, the timing could hardly be worse. Washington is already in trade fights with China and facing friction with Europe. Adding Canada to that list risks isolating the U.S. further, undermining the very alliances it once relied on. Conclusion: who really pulled the rug? So, who truly undermined USMCA? The facts point in one direction. Trump's tariffs, imposed without exemption for Canada, were the first blow. Ottawa's countermeasures were a reaction, not a provocation. Canada's response was about defending its position, while Trump's strategy was about using tariffs as a political tool. He gains domestic support by projecting toughness, but at the cost of stability in North America's most important trade partnership. The deeper issue is not about blame alone. It is whether USMCA can function when its largest member treats the agreement as optional. For businesses, the uncertainty is damaging. For Trump, it is a gamble. And for Carney, it is an opportunity to prove that Canada can defend its sovereignty, even against its closest partner. In the end, the question is not just whether Canada pulled the rug, but whether Trump's tariff gambit risks pulling the entire North American economy into deeper turmoil.
Mexico does what we tell them to do, and Canada does what we tell them to do, because we have the two borders. We have the northern border, the southern border, and they were both
clear
horrible.
to us, this is a political problem, and it needs a political solution. And so I think what we've been calling for is the federal government to very large part of our export program, and farmers are going to have that available in their bins.
Is there anything farmers can do in this moment to try to mitigate the impact? Do they have any levers they can pull?
China has hit Canada with a crushing new tariff, 75.8% on canola seed exports. Overnight, a market worth nearly 5 billion Canadian dollars last year, about 5.9 million tons of seed plus oil and meal, has been shut down. Beijing claims Canada has been dumping cheap canola, but farmers, trade experts, and government officials see it differently. This is retaliation for Canada's decision to impose a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. At first glance, this looks like a farm dispute, but at its core, it's part of a larger game. Canadian canola has become collateral in the struggle between Donald Trump's America and China over the future of electric vehicles. And Ottawa, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, is caught in the middle. The real spark came last year when Canada matched Washington's hard line by blocking Chinese EVs with a 100% tariff. For China, losing Canada's EV market was not the real issue. The deeper concern was geography. If Chinese EVs flowed freely into Canada, they could find a backdoor into the United States under the North American Trade Pact, known as CUSMA or USMCA, the successor to NAFTA. That possibility is unacceptable to Trump. He has made protecting American manufacturing the heart of his political brand. In his blunt style, he reminded Canadians from the Oval Office, "Mexico does what we tell them to do, and Canada does what we tell them to do, because we've got the borders." In Trump's view, Canada isn't a partner negotiating on equal terms. It's a neighbor expected to fall in line. So when Ottawa sided with him on EVs, it protected America's auto sector. But when Beijing retaliated by closing the door on Canadian canola, Trump didn't step in to shield Canada. His message was clear. The U.S. sets the rules, and allies must live with the consequences. For Canadian farmers, this tariff is devastating. Last year, China was their second largest buyer of canola seed. Now that market has vanished just as harvest begins. Farmers can't undo what's already planted. Fields are full, bins will soon be overflowing, and prices are expected to sag. Two immediate problems stand out. First, falling incomes as global buyers know Canada is desperate to sell. Second, storage and cash flow stress, since unsold grain has to be carried into the next season at a cost. The Canadian Canola Growers Association has warned that producers can't face this alone. They've called for federal help, not as a permanent subsidy, but as compensation for sudden losses caused by geopolitics. But that's where things get politically complicated. Ottawa is already running deficits, and every dollar spent to support canola farmers will spark demands for equal treatment from other industries, steel, autos, energy, that have also faced foreign tariffs. That's the domestic trap. Once one sector gets relief, others demand the same. For Prime Minister Mark Carney, the stakes go beyond economics. They cut to the heart of national unity. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre has accused the government of ignoring Western farmers, pointing out that Carney tweeted about International Cat Day before mentioning canola. That may sound petty, but in a digital age, symbols matter. The larger concern is Western alienation. Prairie provinces already feel sidelined by Ottawa's energy and climate policies. Now, with their biggest crop under attack and no quick fix in sight, anger is building. Critics argue that when auto plants in Ontario or steel in Quebec are threatened, the federal government reacts instantly. But when farms in Saskatchewan and Alberta are hit, the response feels slower and less urgent. This perception is dangerous. It deepens divisions inside the country, and it's exactly the kind of fracture Beijing can exploit by targeting a sector tied to regional identity. Look at the bigger chessboard. Canada faces pressure from both sides. Beijing's move is designed to hurt Canada enough that Ottawa rethinks its EV tariffs. Washington, led by Trump, insists Canada must hold the line against Chinese EVs, no exceptions. Could Canada backtrack and ease restrictions on Chinese cars to save canola? Doing so would provoke a fierce reaction from Trump. U.S. automakers have poured billions into EV factories. They will not tolerate cheap Chinese cars slipping into the American market through Canada. Could Ottawa stay firm on EV tariffs and wait Beijing out? Perhaps, but time is expensive. Australia went through the same ordeal when China imposed tariffs on barley. That fight dragged on for about 3 years before the duties were lifted, only after a drawn-out process that involved both WTO proceedings and quiet diplomacy. Canadian farmers cannot afford to sit idle that long. That is Canada's bind. Concede to China and risk Trump's wrath. Side with Trump and sacrifice farmers for years. There is no easy way out. In the short term, Ottawa will likely roll out bridge support for farmers, expand efforts to find new buyers in Europe, Latin America, and Asia, and keep diplomatic lines open with Beijing. These measures can soften the blow but not replace China's market overnight. In the medium term, expect Canada to prepare a WTO complaint, but history shows that legal tools are slow and rarely decisive. The WTO track is about building leverage. The real solution will require a negotiated compromise. In the long term, Canada must rethink its strategy. Agriculture cannot remain so dependent on a single market like China. And trade policy must account for the reality that U.S. politics, and Trump's priorities, set the framework for what Canada can or cannot do. The future may demand deeper integration with American EV and auto supply chains, while simultaneously diversifying agricultural exports far beyond China. The canola crisis is more than an agricultural problem. It's a geopolitical lesson. Donald Trump has drawn a line. No Chinese EVs undermining American industry. China has responded by targeting Canada's farmers, testing the cost of Ottawa's loyalty to Washington. And Canada, despite being a G7 country, finds itself cornered, unable to defend its farmers without risking its most important trade relationship. There are no painless solutions. Support farmers, diversify markets, and prepare for a drawn-out fight. That's the path ahead. But the bigger truth is this. Canola is no longer just a seed. It's now a bargaining chip in the high-stakes contest between Washington and Beijing. And for Ottawa, caught between the two, every move comes with a price.